Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. I was gonna turn the lights off, but somebody got in the way, so maybe I'll turn them off at some point in this video. But it's the weekend again. I just got off my shift working at the haunted house, so now it's time to read some scary stories. What's the creepiest / scariest thing you've seen, but no one believes you? I didn't see it, but I heard it. My friends and I got a cheap set of walkie-talkies from Walmart, and we're playing around with them in the middle of the day. There's a bit of silence as we're trying to figure out the volume, and out of nowhere there's a male voice saying, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," that comes through all our walkie-talkies, and it definitely sounds like it's from one of those aircraft headsets. We try to answer back, but there's no response. I called the non-emergency, but they said there weren't any reports of distressed aircrafts or ships, and even if there were, they couldn't do anything about it. Alternatively, a couple months later, I saw a plane with an engine on fire go over my campus, but apparently no one else did. So wait, you called the police because you thought that a plane was falling out of the sky? What are they gonna do, drive up into the sky and help them out? I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night, we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10, I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip, but when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said that he thought I was sleeping since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I had been and asked why he was going to work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5 something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about all these years later. I was drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors Light I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Yeah, I think I've read this guy's story before. I'm sure that if I did this to Faye for a long time, she'd probably lose all track of time and she could let it go on for 7 hours and not even notice. In the same room of my old house, I have seen a convulsed face floating outside my window. My brother has also seen it too. I saw the same face over a number of periods, and it would do stuff like smile and float closer or further from the glass. Our younger brother a few years later complained that he didn't want to play with the boy in his room anymore, as he was getting too much blood on his toys. It was the same room. Yeah, nobody likes that kid that comes over and just gets blood on everything. Not sure if this counts as creepy or overall scary, but it was weird. Back in high school, I lived in a large apartment complex. It was maybe around 8 or 9 at night and completely dark. I was out with a group of friends of 4 or 5 people. We were just talking and messing around with a friend's pair of walkie-talkies as we decided to look up in the sky as 2 fireballs, or what could be described as fireballs, just appear in the sky and slowly move in a line. Just as that happened, we started getting what sounded like military communication over said walkie-talkies. That was really static, but words came in every now and then. About 10 or so minutes later, the fireballs disappeared and the communication cut out. There was absolutely nothing about this on the news the next morning, and no one ever believed me. What is with everybody just playing with walkie-talkies and seeing things fall from the sky? I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first, I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up. Kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared because I know animals can pick up on that stuff, and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying, slowly, like it was breathing, like something was standing on the other side trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes, naked, watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so, I mustered up the courage to check every room in my house. I friggin' checked every corner too, but there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in, and I completely believed someone was outside my door. So I actually just realized while recording this that I've done this question at the end of a regular video, So I cut a couple of the stories because I've already read them in another video, but there's still lots of good new stuff here. I guess this isn't super scary, and I don't know if it really fits, but it still weirds me out, and my friends just think I'm crazy. Back when I was a freshman in college, I went out with a friend of mine. He ended up dancing with some girl. I went and grabbed a seat at the bar. A girl came up to me and bought me a drink because she liked my style, and introduced herself as Sapphire. We chatted for at least an hour, had a few drinks, and at some point she said she had to leave, so I asked for her number and she scribbled it on a bar napkin. But then we ended up chatting more, and one thing led to another, and she invited me to her apartment. We go there and start hooking up, and she asked if I've ever tried acid, and if I wanted to do some. I said sure. After it kicks in, we go for a walk. We were talking about the constellations and space for a while, but then I noticed she got quiet. I had my eyes glued to the sky for the entire walk, so I look over, and she's gone. I freak out and start retracing my steps to get back to her place, yelling her name and checking bushes. My high self assumed that she was just peeing in a bush. I get back to her apartment, knock on the door, and some guy answers the door. Keep in mind, this was like 4 a.m. at this point. Some guy answers, and I ask if he knew Sapphire, and described her. He said he had no clue who I was talking about, and to just go home. So I did. I ended up crashing at a friend's place, because my trip was going south, and I knew he'd be able to calm me down. The next day comes, and I'm still trying to figure out what happened to her. I called the number she gave me. It was disconnected. Went back to the apartment, same guy answers, still no idea what I'm talking about, even knocked on some of the neighbors, and tried the same room location on different floors. Nothing. Talked to the security guy on the front desk, said he remembered me coming in a few times, but never saw me with a girl. Called up my friend who was at the bar with me and asked if he saw the girl I was with. He said he never saw me with a girl. According to him, I was sitting at the bar alone for a bit, had a few drinks, and left after like 30 minutes. I have no idea who this woman was, or if she even existed, but I remember her so vividly I can't believe that I imagined it. She just vanished. I have no tangible proof of her existence. Freaks me out to this day that I spent an entire night with this person who didn't exist. I still don't know what happened that night. So then, who gave you the acid? Man, that is a pretty weird one. This feels like it belongs more in the reality glitch video we had last week, which is still my favorite scary video I've ever done, by the way. Just after high school, maybe 6 months or so after 9/11, I was a van driver who drove the meals for Meals on Wheels to the place where they get packaged up and taken for home delivery. Anyway, the delivery van only had AM and FM radio, and I was listening to 92.5 FM, when all of a sudden the station cuts out and a transmission that I can only describe as an American version of a number station began playing. It was seemingly random numbers, followed by a long period of the same phrase repeated over and over again. The phrase was, "They took the crosstown bus," over and over again. None of the other drivers heard it, but man, it was creepy to hear. Eventually, the regular radio station came back on, and they never mentioned anything about it. This may be the third radio story we've gotten so far, but it's the first one that's actually kind of creeped me out. I wrote about this a while ago. None of my family really believes me. Everyone just dismissed me as imagining things. So I was getting on the elevator in the metro. To get from the train platform to the main platform, with the turnstiles and exit, you have to take the elevator. So I got on with this older guy. It was just 2 of us. I glanced over and this guy was watching me, pointedly, and he was smiling, but not in a nice, welcoming way. You know, in the cliché creepy pastas where they talk about monsters with unnaturally wide smiles. That's exactly the kind of smile this guy had. Anyway, I looked away from him because I thought he was just crazy or something, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw him making these weird gestures all over his chest. It almost looked like he was making the sign of the cross or something. Finally, the elevator doors opened, and we both got off and walked towards the turnstiles. I swiped my card to exit, and then turned around to see if this dude was following me. And he was gone. There was nowhere else he could have gone. There was only one exit for the station. We were at the only exit for the station. Unless he turned back, ran, and got on another elevator in about 4 seconds. I don't know where the heck he went. Anyway, I'm from a small town, and sometimes weird things happen in the city that I don't quite understand. But I just chalk it up to me being practically a redneck. But this was really out there, and it's been bothering me. You know, I just watched Joker today, and that's all I can really picture in this story. Not really creepy or scary, but my parents went canoeing in the middle of nowhere with some troubled youth. While they were on the river, their canoes capsized, and people were having problems swimming and getting to shore. About 3 or 4 large men came out of nowhere and helped them all to shore, then completely disappeared afterwards. My parents swear they must have been angels, as there's no way they appeared and disappeared that quickly when they were in the middle of nowhere. What, you've never heard of the secret, random, buff guy squad that just patrols the forest and saves people? When I was 3, we were picking up my grandparents for a Sunday drive. I was sitting in the back seat on my passenger side. My grandfather was sitting in front of me. Suddenly, he keeled over, dead of a massive stroke. As they hustled my little sister and me out of the car and into my grandparents' store, I happened to look over my shoulder and plainly saw Grandpa walking down the street with 2 men. Both were dressed in suits, which made it all more incongruous that Grandpa was wearing the same gray sweater and peaked hat he'd been wearing the moment before in the car. There was nothing particularly creepy about the experience, except that I wouldn't accept that Grandpa was dead because, after all, I'd just seen him walking down the street. Naturally, this didn't go over well, but I loved my grandpa. I didn't want him to be dead, and I knew what I had seen. When our family doctor arrived to pronounce Grandpa dead, my mother asked me if I would take his word for it. We have a very good, trusting relationship with our doctor, so I said that I would. The doctor assured me that my grandfather had in fact died, but he was the only grown-up who didn't treat me like I was crazy. He listened respectfully as I told him what I had seen, and he suggested that maybe the men in the suits were angels. This seemed reasonable, problem solved. But to this day, I can still see Grandpa walking down the street with those 2 men, and no matter what my parents tried to tell me, it was just a guy who looked like Grandpa, coincidentally wearing the exact same clothes that he'd been wearing in the car. It was him. You know, maybe after I die, I'll upload a few videos just to reach out and talk to you guys. The scariest thing I saw was at the age of 16. I woke up early in the morning, about 4:30 to 5. Me and some friends were supposed to go on a road trip for the weekend. We had a long ride to one of the stops we wanted to visit and didn't want to be there too late. I look out my window and it's still kind of dark outside. I walk downstairs and see wet footprints all over the house, and suddenly a big man, like 6'7", just bolt past me and out the front door. Not really creepy, but I crapped at least 5 bricks and bolted upstairs to my dad. Nothing got stolen, but things were scattered all over the house. Well, that's all of the scary stories we have for this week. You know, it's felt kind of weird, like, not uploading very much. I think this is only like the 3rd video I've posted this whole week on this channel. But it also just seems like a lot of people are moving on from this channel. I kind of doubt we'll see this channel continue into 2020, and I'll probably try and move on to other things at some point. But thanks to everybody who's been sticking around so far. I'll still try and upload like probably 3 or 4 times a week, which is like way more than most YouTubers, but it seems like nothing for me since I've been doing like 7 days a week for almost 6 months now. But good night everybody, go watch a scary movie after you watch the cat video.